I'd like to call the October 16th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education to order. In front of you, you have the meeting minutes from our October 2nd meeting, and if I could get a motion to approve those minutes when you've had a chance to look at them. Tom? Second? Hazel? All those in favor? We have a majority of those in attendance. Those abstaining? Yeah, okay, thank you. All right. Next, if you could take a look at the agenda for this evening, and if I could get a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Brendan, second. Sherry? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Do I have anyone wishing to address the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and recognition. And the first item is our K through 12 assessment report with Dr. Carenti and Mr. Egan.
Good evening. Oh, I think I need to lower my mic. Thank you. It was for Bill, wasn't it? First of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting Bill and I this evening to talk with you about our student assessments. And we'll be focusing in on our standardized test results this evening. I would like to take a moment to introduce the district curriculum leadership from team. Many of them are here this evening. I would just like to introduce them, and maybe they could just give a little wave to the board so that everybody can put name and faces together. We have Joanne Schulman, our reading coordinator, K4, Karen Scalzo, our writing coordinator, K5, Sarah Broas, our language arts coordinator, 5 through 8, Zoe Robinson, our math coordinator, K through 8, Melinda Meyer, our science coordinator, K through 8, Mary Hanna, social studies coordinator, K through 8, Anthony Bloss, our department chair for math, Bob Stevenson, our department chair for social studies, and Cindy Rivera, our department chair for guidance. I think I've got them all. And then we do have a number of administrators in the audience as well. I see the assistant principals from the high school, as well as Chris from East and Greg, so thank you all for coming. Certainly these curriculum leaders are the content experts who really stay current on best practices and design wonderful learning opportunities for our students. They lead curriculum writing, they lead assessment design, professional learning, data teams, and they assist with the coaching for staff instructionally. We come together monthly not only to review curriculum, but to also grow professionally. So really the ultimate purpose of assessment is to support and enhance student learning. It's multifaceted and should be used to drive instruction. Assessment should be both standardized and non-standardized. And tonight, Mr. Egan and I will present an overview of the standardized assessment results and how they're utilized throughout the district. So annual state testing. By federal and state law, we are required to universally assess students yearly in English language arts and mathematics in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. We also must assess students in science in grades 5, 8, and once in high school. The annual state testing is intended to describe student achievement growth as part of a program evaluation and school district and state accountability systems. It's also intended to provide an annual snapshot of student achievement. However, this snapshot must be used with district assessments when making educational decisions. Annual state testing is not useful as a sole measure of student achievement or a program evaluation. It's not useful as a source of guidance for curriculum and instruction. Teaching to the test is never quality instruction and does not result in long-lasting learning. Annual state testing is not a substitute for other ways in which student learning should be assessed, and we must continue to assess student learning in a variety of fashions. And that really comes down to what we utilize as our district assessments throughout the course of the year. And that will take on many varieties: formative assessments, portfolios, progress monitoring, observations, universal screenings, diagnostic assessments. We have a wide variety to give us a good understanding of our assessment and how students are performing. So last year, our students participated in the Smarter Balanced Assessment, the CMT, the CAPT, and the Connecticut SAT. So these will be the assessments that I will speaking about, and then Mr. Egan will take a break, we'll answer some questions, and then Mr. Egan will be talking more specifically about SAT, ACT, and advanced placement testing at the high school. There are also 2 alternative assessments available to students with significant cognitive disabilities, and those decisions are made at IEP meetings, and those are the Connecticut Alternative Assessment and the CMT CAPT Science and Skills Checklist. So what's new for 2017, 2018? We do have our Smarter Balance test windows been published already. It's around the same dates as it was last year, from March 26th through May 25th. When they give us that testing window, that doesn't mean that kids are testing that entire time. We obviously set up a schedule, and really the children are assessed in probably about 3 different subtests that they'll take. They'll usually take their ELA, that might be in 2 portions, and then they'll take a math test that's usually in 2 given days. Once again, it really varies depending on the age level, but when they give us that testing window, it's an opportunity for us to make sure that we complete all of that assessments within that given time frame. Most of our assessments within the district here usually are between April and May. We usually find it's the best time. They come back from that April break and we'll begin our assessments. There are some 8th grade assessments that we might do right before that April break, but that's usually the time span in which we're giving them. The Connecticut SAT Day, it has been scheduled for March 21st, and we have 2 makeup dates, which are April 24th and April 25th. Probably the biggest question right now is the CMT. So the state of Connecticut has asked the federal government for a waiver this year in administering the CMT to our 5th and 8th graders. The reason being is because it's time to administer our next generation science standards. So the Connecticut Mastery Test as well as the CAPT are both outdated tests. They don't align with our core standards. They don't align with the next generation science standards. So similarly to what they did with the Smarter Balanced assessment about 4 years ago, they ran a pilot and a field test. And so they asked us to do a pilot and a field test in those grades. When they do those pilot field tests, really the only thing that counts is the participation rate, because it's important that we have all of our students participate so they can use that data and analyze that data to determine what questions are valid, which are unreliable, what are not valid questions. But there will be no student results reported. So right now we're waiting to hear as to whether the 5th and 8th graders will have to take the CMT and the Next Generation Science Standards Assessment Field Test. So we've been in contact with the state. We're hoping to hear soon. They're very hopeful that our 5th and 8th graders won't have to take it, but right now we're planning on it. As for the 10th graders will not be taking the CAP this year. So the students in high school just need to be tested 1 year. They already took the test last year as 10th graders. However, we are going to ask our 11th graders to participate in the Next Generation Science Standards Assessment Field Test. Once again, that would be a participation that we're looking for our students to be assessed in. Eventually, starting next year, the 11th graders will serve as the grade level in which the Next Generation Science Standards will be assessed. And that is truly due to the content that they're asking the students to be aware of. So we will keep you posted in regards to that. So the CMT, first of all, last year was the first time that the CMT was computer-based. The students took it on the computer, but it was not adaptive. So basically, they took the CMT and they moved it over to a computer, and the students took a computer-based assessment, and it was given to the students in grades 5 and 8. The students received scores in the 3 different strand areas: science content and scientific inquiry. They also receive 1 overall score that places them in a performance level, and the CMT has 5 different performance levels. So we do have the preliminary results of the CMT. Believe it or not, the data has not been released on our Ed site, which is a website that holds all the state testing results. So we have no DERG comparison data at this time. Although in talking with our colleagues, I do believe that we did well. So our students this year in grade 5, 89% of them were at or above goal. So that means they either performed at the level 4 or the level 5 area. And then you can see how the males and the females performed. Last year, our 5th graders were at about 90% of our students were at or above goal. And this year, our 8th graders are at 88%, and last year, about 89% of them were at or above goal. Once again, these scores could shift slightly once they come out on Ed site. We've noticed some of the shifting taking place by, a 0.1 or a 0.2, and that's just because they're calculating all of the out-of-district scores that come in and everything else that comes in as well. So the CAPT is, once again, also a computer-based assessment. It's not adaptive, and the students do receive scores in 5 different strand areas: science content and scientific inquiry. And then they also receive 1 overall score that places them in a performance level. And there's 5 performance levels for the CAPT. So here are results for 10th graders, and once again, these are preliminary results. We're still waiting for them to become public in order to give us those comparisons for the DERG. For some reason, our scores in the science area did drop. Last year, they were at about 79%, and we've dropped to 72%. However, that tends to be a pattern across the state, and it's also a pattern that we've seen within the DERG in talking with my colleagues. So they're not sure if it's just that people have already started shifting and teaching to those next generation science standards. They're not sure if the computer-based assessment threw some of the 10th graders off. They're in a different place than our 8th graders were when they were taking the assessments. Our 8th graders are very comfortable taking computer-based assessments. So we're not really sure, and it's really hard for us to talk about those results until we can really dive more deeply into them when they are published. So we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about the Smarter Balanced results because those are the ones that are on the Ed website and they are public, and so it's very important that we can go through that. So the Smarter Balanced is a computer adaptive test and contains a variety of items such as multiple choice and open-ended responses. There are 2 different types of the assessment. There's the computer adaptive test, and then there's the performance task. And those of you may recall, it was 2 years ago that they removed the performance task in ELA. So we only have a performance task in math. And the performance task in math is really designed to provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate their ability to apply their knowledge and higher order thinking skills to explore and analyze a complex real world situation. And so we do have those results for the performance task in math. So in English language arts, there are 4 areas of knowledge and skills that are measured. The students will show that they can understand a variety of complex, grade-appropriate, informational, and literary texts. They must use evidence to support their ideas in written responses at every grade level. They must produce effective writing for a range of purposes. They interpret and use information delivered orally to determine main ideas and summarize or analyze, which is part of the listening comprehension assessment. And then the research is really where they research a topic and use the findings to take a position. And so are the 4 areas that they are assessed within the ELA. So here's just an example of a question from 5th grade on the ELA. In this example, the student must go back, they must read the passage, they need to determine what the words mean in context, and then use evidence to support their answers. And what we're finding is that questions like these are similar to the questions that will appear on the redesign of the SAT, and that they do align with the Connecticut Common Core standards. And what we'll notice here, the difference between something that will happen on the SAT versus on the Smarter Balance, is that the kids really have to do an open-ended response here. So they have to write a paragraph and find that evidence and support that evidence. In math, they too are assessed in 4 areas of knowledge and skills. And those are the concepts and procedures, problem solving, modeling and data analysis, and communicating reasoning. The students will explain and use mathematics to solve problems. They'll complete math problems quickly and accurately. They'll understand how math concepts link together. They apply their mathematical knowledge to solve real-world problems, and then they communicate their mathematical reasoning. So here's an example from a 5th grade Smarter Balanced assessment. And in this example, you'll see that the students are required to apply what they know about fractions. So there is no guesswork, and it certainly takes more time for them to figure out the solution to each of those problems that are up there. But in both cases, the ELA and the mathematics, the test is untimed, and the students have ample time to complete the assessment. So this is just a great example of how the students in 5th grade are using that multiplication of fractions, which was a shift when we did those Connecticut Core Standards. So being assessed in multiplication of fractions and really understanding how to solve that problem gives us a deeper understanding of what they know about fractions. So when you're talking about the scoring is slightly different than the CMT and the CAPT. And there are 4 achievement levels, 4 being the highest, and these have no relationships to the CMT or the CAPT, and our hope is to have most of our students performing at a level 3 or a level 4. In addition to the achievement scores that the students will receive, they also receive information in a performance indicator for each of those areas that I just spoke about for ELA and mathematics. Here's the ELA example. So they will receive a performance indicator in reading, listening, writing, and research. So when they remove the ELA performance task, they combined research and writing together. And so now the kids get one performance indicator in that area. And they will receive above standard, at or near standard, and there's also a below standard. And so it gives people an understanding of how they performed in each of those areas of knowledge. The parents also receive a report. Here's a sample of the report. On the report that they receive, they also receive scaled scores. So they receive an achievement level, they receive how they performed in a performance indicators, and then they also receive an overall scaled score. They receive a scaled score in ELA, and then they receive a scaled score in mathematics. So last year we were not able to report the scaled scores. The purpose of the scaled scores is that they remain constant. So it will run from 2,200 to 2,800, and that scale stays the same from grades 3 through 8. So you're really able to track growth, and a parent's able to see the growth. So even if they're performing in one achievement area, maybe it's level 4, you're still looking to see that that scale scored has gone up. And so it's a way for us to track the growth over time. And then they also receive a comparison to the average scaled score for the district, and the school's also on that report. So it's multiple ways in which they're reporting out the information for parents. It's a way for teachers to look at the information as well as our coordinators and our administrators. So what do we do with all of these results? First of all, we take a look at the big picture. And right here is how our students performed in ELA. I'm going to begin speaking about ELA first, and that's our English Language Arts. And once again, we're looking for students to perform at level 3 or level 4. I did put up our 2016 results because now we can give a better comparison because that performance task was not given in 2016. It wasn't given in 2017. And I think we're proud to report the results. This is how the students in grades 3 through 8 performed as a district. So this is combined scores. So we take a look at the big picture. We're really proud of the growth that we see in ELA, but it's important for us to dive more deeply and say, okay, so what do these scores really mean? So then we start taking a look at the grade level results. And it's important for us to look at that. And we begin to take a look at the grade level results, and although we don't have perfectly matched cohorts up here, once again, we can see some really nice improvement. I think what's really powerful is, if you take a look at grade 7 in 2016, where it was 77.9% of the students were meeting or exceeding that achievement level, and then you jump up to 2017 as 7th graders, 87% of those students. So that's significant gains. I think it's also important when you look at that grade 4 and you have 89.9% of our students meeting or exceeding that achievement level. That's a high percentage of our kids. But to once again see the growth up to 92% is really speaking a lot about the student achievement and the growth that has occurred. Just a few examples that I want to point out. And then, of course, we return to our big picture and we look at our overall results. And it's always nice to do a comparison to our DIRG. And once again, we go back and we look at where our students performed at level 3 or level 4. And I think we all should be very proud. We're not only #1 in the DIRG, but we're #1 in the state in how our students performed. So it's really big kudos to all the people at the building level and for all the hard work that they're doing with their students. I also thought it was important to take a look at that level 4 because we always want to know, are we really moving our students to that highest level possible on these standardized assessments? And I think it's really powerful when you look at the overall results from grades 3 through 8, the 56.3%. So just a little bit over half of our kids are really meeting that level 4 area. So once again, we do like to compare back with grade level and take a look at it by grade level, and we do like to do it back into comparison with our DIRG. So we break it apart, and we begin to raise questions about the grade levels. We begin to raise questions about the cohorts of students. Our students overall performed extremely well. Grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, they were at the top of the DIRG and certainly at the top of the state. And certainly as we look at grades 7 and 8, once again, at the top of the DIRG, #2 in the DIRG and #2 in the state. So a lot to be proud of as far as the growth that has occurred in this area. It's also important that we dive back deeply into that grade level data and really take a close look at how the students perform by level. So we go back and we take a look at how did students perform in level 1, what was the percentage of students that performed in level 2, level 3, and level 4, and then certainly combine level 3 or above. This is important because when we're starting to analyze that data, now you're starting to get into those individual students and where were those individual students performing. It gives us some information as we're working with teachers and the coordinators and the administrators and the specialists to really analyze those results. And then certainly as we've send out those parent reports, all of the teachers and the coordinators and administrators are always available to answer any questions that parents might have. And I think what's also really important that I wanted to point out here is this is also a time where we kind of triangulate that data. So when you start to look at the individual student results, these are the kinds of questions that you start to say, are there any surprises? Were there things that were happening with district assessments that were a surprise when we got these results? Do our NWEA results say something different about this student? So we know that standardized assessments, it's a snapshot. So you could have a child who had a bad day, whose allergies were acting up. Anything's possible. So it's always important that we bring it back to our district assessments and what we know about students, and so that we're making the best decisions about them. So I'm going to move over into the area of math. And once again, we follow a very similar procedure for math, similar to what we did for ELA. So we start with the big picture, and this is how our students in grades 3 through 8 performed, all combined. And I think we've had huge growth from 2016. So we're 79.1%. We're at that level 3 or 4, and now we're at 85.1% performing at level 3 or level 4. We also take a look at it by grade level. We break it apart. We look at these cohorts. Once again, they're not matched cohorts, but it gives us a good understanding of how they've performed. And I think what's most notable is some of the growth, especially that has occurred up in the middle school. So when you look at grade 6, we're in 2016, 69.9%. We're at or exceeding that achievement level. And then as grade 7, 82%. So that's very nice growth. Once again, grade 7, same situation in 2016, 73.9%, and then as grade 8, 83.7. And then it's also nice to kind of track that third grade, which was at 90.4, and where did they end as fourth graders at 92. So that means that we've kept them at that high end, and we've even helped them to continue to grow. So once again, we go back to that big picture. How did our students perform grades 3 through 8 overall in our DIRG? And once again, we were number 1 in the DIRG and number 1 in the state. So we're very proud of that information on how our students performed. And I also did a comparison here of how our students perform at level 4, because I thought that was important for us. So we had 85.1% at level 3 or 4, and then 64% of those students were at a level 4. So that's over 50%, which is nice to see. And then we also bring it back to the grade level picture, and we take a look at how our grade level performed at the DIRG. And once again, we've got some real positive information. Grade 4, grade 5, grade 7, we're all first in the DIRG and first in the state. Grade 6 and 8, we're second in the DIRG and second in the state. So a lot for us to be proud of. But we don't stop there, because it's important for us to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the kids. And so it's going back and doing that triangulation of data, really taking a close look at where does this compare to NWEA results, our district assessments, our exemplars. What does this picture tell us about our students? Are there any surprises out there? Are there anything that we should be looking at? I think one area that we really want to take a close look at is that grade 4, where we've got 72.7% of them at a level 4. So in some cases, you're really looking to say, so how are you going to be challenging a group of fourth graders that are sitting in front of you? So it's really great information to see. Once again, diving in deeply to the level 1s, level 2, level 3. And once again, I think what's important to point out, both for ELA and math, is you are going back to that scaled score. So these are percentages, but when you start to look at those individuals, it's really going back and saying, so if this individual was at a level 2 last year, did they still make the growth that they should have on that scaled score? And did we help them to meet that growth, and how can we help them to continue to grow? I think it's important to point out that all of our students are assessed, students who have IEPs, students who are also English language learners. They are not exempt from the state testing unless they've been here for less than a year. So after that, they're put right in with our state testing. They might be given accommodations to help them access the information on the state assessment, but there's a baseline that we're given to them so that we get those results and we can track that over time for them as well. So we have had a time where we've been visiting with all of the buildings administrators. The curriculum leadership has been spending time breaking apart the data, meeting with the building administrators, talking with them about the data, analyzing that data, meeting with grade level teachers, and in many cases it's a celebration because of the growth that has occurred. I think that the growth is really due to the alignment of our curriculum to those Connecticut core standards. I think we've really put a lot of work into our district assessments, and I think, as you might recall last year when I talked a lot about RTI, it's looking at those district assessments, coming to data teams, having conversations about students and what we can do to help each of those individual students grow. What's the differentiation look like in a classroom for a group of students? We've mailed out all of those parent reports. We're available to meet and conference with parents who've contacted the school. Sometimes they're contact their teacher, sometimes a building administrator, sometimes a coordinator, sometimes a counselor, but we're always available to answer questions. And then obviously we're always doing that triangulation of data and looking at the next steps that we have. So at this time, I think it's probably best to open it up to questions before we move into the next assessment data. And we do have people here who would be probably more than happy to answer questions as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Correnti. So why don't I do that? Why don't I just open it up to the board? Does anyone have any questions on what we've heard thus far? Sherry.
Well done. Bravo to the teaching staff and the amazing results. I imagine you're going to have many of your peers from the Dirk schools wanting to come meet with you and share best practices and really understand the excellent performance on all of these assessments. It's great. I had just two questions. The first is, can you just remind me, so was last year the first year of the SBAC? So last year we didn't have the year-over-year comparisons because that was considered a field test the year before, or?
We did not have the year-to-year comparisons because they removed the ELA performance task. So year one, the students took the ELA performance task as well as the computer adaptive test. So there's two pieces of it. As soon as they removed that ELA performance task, there was no way for them to do the comparison from one year to the next for ELA because they were missing a big piece of the information. So they didn't report out even the scaled scores growth for math because I think it was just going to be too confusing in that regard. Although we did our own analysis of it and really took a deep look at it because the scaled scores were there. It was a matter of us diving in and taking a close look at it. But as far as the scaled scores from 2015 in ELA in comparison to the scaled scores in 2016, there was no comparison for them because that performance task was removed. Why did the state remove it? They were trying to reduce the amount of testing that students were taking, and they were finding that the performance task in ELA was taking close to 2 hours. It was probably a pretty rigorous assessment. It gave us a lot of great information, but I think we can find other ways through our district assessments to get at those results. And I think it was a smart choice on their part because it just reduced down the amount of time that the students were sitting and taking the standardized assessment. So we have results from 2015, 2016, 2017.
And so looking from the 16-17 comparison, there's no gauge R&R issues any longer. That's the field test was that process
right.
was
So the field test was actually 2014,
right. Okay.
And then from there, the first one where they reported results was 2015, and then 2016, 2017.
Right. Great. And then my other question was in relation to the science and specifically the 10th grade results. I'm just wondering if we do look at those results by like 9th grade science selection, which, I mean, we have earth science, we have regular biology, and we have honors biology in the freshman year, which I'm assuming that your freshman science selection is going to impact your assessment, your testing on that in 10th grade year, or not. I don't know.
That testing doesn't affect the placement at all, where they start. Or
No, I know it doesn't affect placement, but I'm just wondering if, like, as we unpack those results, which dropped significantly from 79 to 72%, if when we unpack that, do we actually correlate it back to their science lections?
No, we don't. I mean, from what you even gleaned from the data, statewide, that there was a significant drop all over, and we're actually probably toward the top of the state, even though we scored lower than we had previously. So.
But I think what we're probably noticing is that we've had that shift with the next generation science standards, and we've never seen the impact with the course selection before when they've taken the 10th grade cap. So we've done a nice job with integrating in those standards that were expected within the cap. I think it's just that we've started to do some of the shift. And I think they were also saying between the computer adaptive assessment as well. So it's just a hard year to try to do that comparison when we threw in one more piece of, to have that computer piece for the students.
I know Jill pointed it out too, but it was literally the first and only time they took that test on the computer. The state put it in the last year of the assessment.
Got it.
So.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Penny?
The Smarter Balance assessment tests now are national tests?
No, those
Is
are.
it just,
So that's what the state of Connecticut is using. Other states might be using PARC. Other states might have decided that they're not using Smarter Balance or the PARC, and they've created their own assessment. So the federal government says that we must test our students annually in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. And the state of Connecticut used to use the CMT for years. That was their own designed assessment that they created and administered. And I think they actually, I recall them trying to create their own assessment, but they would never get the bank of questions and be able to test it out in time for us to move forward with the pilot and then certainly the year of 2015. So they've adopted the Smarter Balanced as that assessment. It's all aligned to the Common Core standards and the Connecticut Core standards, and that's some states are probably still taking the performance task and the ELA.
so I guess my question is, there are other states that are using these tests?
There are,
Do we
but I do
ever-
not have those results. I mean, I've never actually dove in to look at those results. I would have to try to figure out which states and which schools are using them, and certainly could probably find it.
I don't know if it'd be of interest or not, but, one of the things you're interested in is how our schools compare. We try and compare ourselves to Scarsdale, to all the best districts across the country, and it'd just be interesting.
New York actually.
I'm not saying
New
to do
York
it,
actually
if you
uses
think it's
PARC.
worthwhile.
New York actually uses PARC.
Okay.
So if you're comparing yourself to Westchester County, there's not going to be a comparison because they use PARC versus Smarter Balance. But we would have to find other, I'm sure there are other communities similar to us in the, in the United States that we could find. I just would have to find those communities.
So I had another question, which is, I don't get it as frequently as I used to, but now that you've had 3 or 4 years of familiarity with these standards and this curriculum, how are we finding it in terms of its rigor and the way that it's, I guess, its accuracy in testing?
And I'm happy to let one of the coordinators answer that question in regards to rigor and curriculum. Sarah and Zoe, do you want to answer that? Bill, do you want to hand them the mic?
Sure. We do find that the Smarter Balanced assessment is quite rigorous. It requires quite a bit of stamina for our kids to sit and really dive in and do a close read of the passages. There are 3 different parts of the test, or those 3 different claim areas that are being assessed. So the students are going to see a very long passage. They're going to answer questions about a theme, and then they have to go in and answer the question based on the evidence that's provided. So in the days that we used to take the test, it was like we would cross out answers, and we'd say, oh, it's not A, it's not B, it's not C. Now they'll have 4 choices for theme, and then part B of the question will ask them to choose, say, 3 of 9 examples from the text that support that, and they have to have both parts correct. So it's really asking kids to give a very close read of, I mean, that's a big picture idea of theme, but it'll ask the same kind of question. Excuse me, for vocabulary. They have to listen to a small passage and really pay attention to the details in order to answer it accurately. And then they have to mimic the style and craft of an author in the writing part. So there's quite a bit of rigor throughout the entire test, and it requires perseverance and stamina. Sorry.
I would say a lot of the same holds true for math. Students are required to think flexibly in math and not just compute for an answer. There are given scenarios such as, what is the largest whole number that could be rounded to 500? And then we ask them to think about, what are some common misconceptions you might make? And it's not natural for students to go to 549. They'll often say 499. So it's really understanding the number line and number sense and how we use numbers flexibly. So I think it is asking them to think in different ways to analyze their own work and use their toolkit to understand how to find the answer, as opposed to just computing for an answer. There's also a lot of reading in the math assessments, so we're teaching students to how to decompose a problem, to really figure out what the entry point. A lot of the practice standards are embedded within our curriculum to persevere and justify and use modeling to figure out what the most sensible response would be to a question. So as far as rigor, I think we're always giving students real and relevant problems that they can think about and apply the math that they're learning into real-world context. So they're definitely thinking in the math class.
Thank you.
Hazel? Just wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure, maybe you did touch on this, and anybody that is working with the students. Is there a parallel or anything with any of the testing and the college boards?
Sarah, you want to answer that? Want me to? So certainly, I think, go ahead, Sarah, why don't you take that? Or I don't think Evan's here this evening, so no.
So certainly, the SAT is being redesigned to, I think
It has
that
been
Jill,
redesigned.
it has been redesigned to mimic a lot of the skills and procedures that the SBAC are looking for. The College Board is, well, one of the chief architects of the Connecticut Core Standards is also affiliated with the College Board, and so there's some key connections that are occurring from not only the Connecticut Core Standards up into the college institutions, but certainly with the assessment plans as well.
Other questions? Maria?
For the percentage of kids that are at level 1 and 2, what type of remediation takes place to bring them up? And a second question, well, I'll ask that one first.
Sure. So once again, we need to dive deeply into those individual students. There are some students in those levels that might be having an individual education plan and receiving special education services. So it's always having that conversation with the special educators as well as the general educators to make sure that we're balancing off what we're instructing the students on. And so we're always looking at their growth on the assessments and certainly helping to remediate those students and to help give the direct instruction that they need. And then you might also have students in that area that might be in response to intervention. So they might be receiving a Tier 2 or Tier 3 plan, and they might be receiving direct instruction from a reading specialist or a math specialist. Once again, it's using some diagnostic assessment tools to try to figure out what is the student's area that they need instruction in. So you never use that smarter balance to figure that out. That's where you're going to dive more deeply into our district assessments as well as our diagnostic tools to figure it out. Is it breaking down in their fluency? Is it breaking down in their accuracy? Is it breaking down in their comprehension? Does it break down differently in information comprehension versus, nonfiction versus fiction? So what is it that we need to work with the students on and give them that direct instruction? And then we're always looking to make sure that they're monitoring growth, and that's part of that data teams and that response to intervention and coming back and having conversations about it.
Well, my other question was about, as the scores are coming up, and we say we're not teaching to the test, but the test kind of determines what we teach in a way. So are we teaching to the test? And I remember when Common Core first came out, everyone said it's the base, it's the ground, it's the minimum. And the second part of that would be, is there a different test that you can use to show higher than Common Core?
So it's probably very close to impossible to teach to this test because of the adaptive nature of it, first of all, but also because of all the standards that are wrapped up into the test. So really it comes down to the curriculum, and it really comes down to your units of study, and it really comes down to unpacking those standards and understanding what those standards are asking students to do. And that's been a lot of the work that we've been doing. It's taking a look at a standard, sitting with a group of grade level teachers and unpacking that standard so everybody has the same understanding of what students need to be able to do, what they need to be able to know. It's part of the curriculum. And then we certainly have our units of study, and we have our district assessments that are based on our units of study. So it's very challenging to teach to the test. And it's really about coming down to having curriculum that's been aligned. But I think more importantly, it's really talking about the assessment piece that you do with those district assessments, analyzing those that district assessment, and then talking about what's the next step for each of the students within your classroom. How are you going to differentiate the instruction within that classroom to help all of those students to grow? I don't know if the coordinators have anything else to add, but certainly.
One of the things that we're working really hard on is making thinking visible for students so they can take whatever the skills and strategies are that we're teaching within a particular concept and really applying that and transferring that beyond whatever the particular piece that we're working on to something that's authentic in real world. That's really where that cognitive engagement occurs. So when we talk about the SBAC and we're talking about the test, that's where we're really looking for kids to transfer that thinking, the strategies and the skills that we're teaching into this task. So I would second Jill's point that it's nearly impossible to teach to this test. It's even in terms of the writing, years ago when it was CMT, 7th grade only assessed persuasive writing, 6th grade was expository. We don't know the actual writing tasks that are in front of our students. It could be narrative, it could be argument, or it could be informational. So we have to, instead of teaching one particular mode of writing and getting them really strong in that one area, we really have to teach them the visible thinking strategies so they can apply it in those situations.
Also, when you look at the units of study, the curriculum that we have, and we pull out the standards, the assessments, when you actually look at them and unpack them, there's a lot of authenticity in it. So what types of questions that are there, say in the research field, it's what you have to do if you're going to research in elementary grades, high school, college. And so I feel that they really ask kids to think and apply this knowledge in real life situations. So I feel the standards are actually a really good thing.
And I think when you're looking at the curriculum documents, it's about what those essential questions are. What is it that you want students to be able to do at the end of your unit, and how do you plan backwards to have them be those thinkers and be able to persevere through challenging problems? How do you address misconceptions? So why are students making the same mistake over and over again? And in our data teams, we talk about being proactive in the instructional strategies we give students. If I know for the last 2 years my students have been struggling with being able to multiply fractions, then what am I doing in my instructional practices to ensure that they're more successful? And I think when we sit as a data team, we talk about that as a group. So if a teacher A is doing something that's really being successful, we share those strategies with each other, and we work as a community and form those PLCs to really have student-centered classrooms where we're learning from each other and being able to establish the targets being met.
So really, it sounds like the SBAC is not very diagnostic at all. Local assessments are. And so whether or not the impact is seen, it's sort of hit or miss. I mean, not hit or miss, but depending on what's being tested, it just would reinforce what you're doing versus define your next steps.
And that goes back to, I think, what I talked about of what the intentions are. It's that snapshot. It's going to give us that accountability piece. It's not used to make, big changes with your programs. It's really coming back to saying, it's coming back to your curriculum and saying, are we aligned with Connecticut core standards? Do we understand what those standards are asking students to be able to do? And it's really coming back to our curriculum documents. We would like to think similar to CMT and CAP, that our students should perform well because of the rigor that we put within our curriculum and what we require students to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think there are times where some of our district assessments do have more challenging pieces than they will be faced with in our Smarter Balance. And that's why I think it's so important for us to always triangulate our data and look back at our data. So we have our NWEA, which gives us kind of a perspective, but then it's really coming back to those district assessments and really determining, and I think, when we talk about the big essential question and what do we want students to be able to know and be able to do at the end of the unit of study, and then how are we assessing the students to see if they're able to do that, that gives us the real information.
Hazel?
Answers are fantastic. Every time you're answering something, I'm going, oh, this is so fantastic. It's a course. It's a course in itself. Really terrific job. I wanted to ask about one of the variables you did discuss on the impact of the being able to type and using that. What has been the impact and good or bad, or is it something that you have targeted to change in any way in the curriculum or at home?
So typing is certainly, you only get better at typing through practice. So what you'll see at the 3 elementary schools is they do a lot of type hype. They offer, similar to how we would have Mighty Math Minutes, where kids would do math problems and they would record down their minutes. We do the same for typing. So even if the students came to the computer lab once every 6 days and practiced typing, we know that the only way that they're going to get better is to practice that on a regular basis. So we do encourage kids to, try to use 2 hands. That makes the typing a little bit faster. And believe it or not, they're holding their own. I think the bigger piece is getting 3rd graders, 4th graders, and quite frankly, even 8th graders to go back and read what they typed. So I think that's part of it's that editing piece, because their brains are sometimes moving so fast and their hands can't keep up with it. But it's getting them to stop, go back, reread their paragraph that they just typed, and see is there pieces that they have missed within that paragraph that they want to add to. And that's, I think, important. So we do try to put some of our district assessments onto computers as well, so that they get that practice of being on a computer and having that exposure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I have a couple questions. When, I don't know if you said this and I missed it, but I know, when will we hear if we get the waiver for the CMT?
So they're hoping to hear soon. I mean, I'm good friends with the people at the State Department of Ed, but I actually just saw them 2 weeks ago at a session at CES, and they were still waiting to hear from the federal government as far as whether we're going to be getting that waiver. So certainly, I'm suspecting that we'll probably hear by January. That's my guess.
Have you heard of other districts applying, or, in anyone else in the state?
So it's really comes down to the state of Connecticut. So
Yeah.
the state of Connecticut puts
Right.
in their waiver. They put their
Okay.
waiver back in, in June, and they're just waiting to hear.
Okay.
They have every reason to believe that they'll get the waiver because they got it for the Smarter Balance. When we did the pilot for Smarter Balance, we didn't do any CMT or CAP testing that year at all. So students only took the field test, and that was all that they took. So I think they're assuming that the same will happen here.
So I'm writing January down. Hopefully.
That's my guess. And the reason I'm saying January is because that's really when all of the district test coordinators come together, and there's lots of decisions that have to be made about scheduling of all of the assessments.
Okay. And then I guess I think it is important for, all of us to understand, I was disappointed to see that the next generation science standards testing was going to be done in 11th grade at the time when this, so we have a state test that the state science test that used to be done in 10th grade is now being moved to 11th grade at the same time that the Connecticut CMT is also being administered to those 11th graders. And if you could give us some color on what the state's reasoning for adding, another level of testing for those 11th graders who are, obviously highly stressed already.
I think they did it based on the content of what they're expecting students to know and be able to do by 11th grade. And that's really where they're testing those next generation science standards, and that's what they're looking to do. I think we're all hoping that when they go to roll out the next generation science assessment, that it will be earlier than in that April time window that we'll be able to assess the kids. So we're hoping that it might still be within that March date, which is, I think, a much better time for juniors than that April date. So this was, a decision that was made. We did have high school representation. I know Christian sat on that committee as well, but I think it comes down to the content that they're expecting students to know. And I just think that they felt that they needed one more year before they took that assessment.
Okay. Penny?
Did you unpack the data based upon males and females? And if so, did you find anything significant?
So we did unpack that at each of the building levels. We spent a good time talking about that at each of the grade levels. We're really not noticing any statistical significance between the males and the females. Every so often, you'll run into maybe one school might have a little bit difference, but then you've got to dive more deeply into those individuals. So, females performed lower. Is there a reason as to why the females may have performed lower? Are there less females? Are there more females? So you're raising all those questions. Across the district, we didn't see anything statistically significant. So that's where we really dove into more building level. And so when we were presenting the data and having conversations at the building level, it was really more talking about that grade level and saying, were there differences that we noticed there?
Well, there have been differences in the past, so I would say that's fantastic to hear. And I know that we were trying different strategies with particularly getting boys to read more, and it appears that they're working.
Right, and what's interesting is
So,
I don't think we were noticing a pattern across
Right.
the district. We might have noticed, a group of fourth graders at one school, and then it's trying to dive more deeply into why that may have happened.
That's great news. Thank you for all the hard work to the entire team.
Okay. Maria?
Just to add to the question about the 11th grade test, when students are stressed, it says that participation rate will be reported but not results. Would students get results, and what happens if the participation rate's low? What's...
It's a good question. So it's the same question that we had to answer when we were doing the Smarter Balance pilot. So we're looking to have 95% of our students take the assessment. The student results, the students will never receive those individual results. I believe even when they did the Smarter Balance field tests, the districts didn't receive the results. It was just the participation was reported. And so obviously we're looking to have that 95% or more of our students participate. And we do encourage our students to try their best and to try to take the field test just like it was a regular assessment. I think we have a little bit more success in grades 3 through 8 than necessarily in juniors, but we will do our best to try to move that forward. Everything goes back to that, accountability index, and when you don't have that 95% meeting that participation rate, then you could drop down. So if we're looking at New Canaan Public Schools and we might have been a district of distinction, you could drop down from that because you didn't hit your participation rate.
And just to share historically, when they did run the pilot years ago, they had communicated to us that they would not be sharing the results. And then about 6-8 months later, the results started coming out, and people were talking about the school-wide scores. You couldn't do anything with them, and they were invalid as far as reliability across, but there were conversations across the state, and there were numbers that were being published that, despite the fact they had said there wouldn't be. So that was disconcerting, and we worry about that a little bit too here.
And would this cause a scheduling issue, like it's one of those days where it's a half-day 11th grader testing? I mean, does it eat into a school day to do the test?
So we're still trying to work through those details, right, Mr. Sullivan? So Mr. Sullivan does an incredible job organizing the Connecticut SAT as well as the CAPT in the past. And so we will sit down in December and try to map that all out and figure out what's going to be best for students. The challenge that we always run into with science is that in 11th grade, they're sitting in all different science classes with all different, sometimes grade levels. So it's hard to say that we're going to test in this bio class or this chemistry class or this physics class because of where the students are sitting. So we're trying to work through all of those details, and we'll get those out to you as soon as we have them.
And again, on the testing itself, and it is a lot in the junior year, but one of the things they've also done, Connecticut has, when it was in the 10th grade year with the CAPT, where we had all of the CAPT tests, it would go 2 weeks typically, where every day was disrupted for a 2-week period and things would be stretched out. Now they are condensing the days. So it's the 1 day for the SAT, and then we would hope that it'd be the 1 day for whatever the next generation science test is going to be. So I don't love seeing it in the junior year for a variety of reasons, but at least it's not spread out over a 2-week period of time like it used to be with the CAPT when that was in 10th grade. So that helps a bit.
And there's even decisions we've made as a school not to do, to disrupt, daily instruction, like the PSAT all-day test that they did a few years ago, which we didn't have control over. We as a school made the decision not to do that, to allow our students to take on a Saturday so we wouldn't lose a day of instruction, where some other places are testing during the school day. For us, we said that wasn't something we should do.
Sherry?
Just one last, it's a comment and a question, but I think again, we should all celebrate these assessment results and the fact that in both the math and ELI, number one in the DIRG and the state is something that we should really acknowledge and celebrate. But I also, as a board member and as a parent, want to say that I've always been so impressed by the wide variety of assessments beyond the standardized testing here that give us so much incredible feedback into our child's education and really allows really the rigor of the curriculum and the rigor of the teaching to really deliver excellence in education. So I just want to thank all of you for that, because it's really incredible.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, because it is impressive to see, the growth in scores that we've had over the last year. So, and I would like to backtrack and just say, while I'm not thrilled about the added testing in the junior year, at the same time, I think about how, these aren't tests that we're asking our kids to study and prepare for. This is an assessment of what we've prepared them for. So, while it's not fun, it really should be just, kids showing up, and if we put it in its proper perspective that this is just another test and you don't have to study for it, it's what you're learning, and it shouldn't add a lot of extra stress. So, I'd still like to, push the state a little, but that's it.
Well, I will share, Sherry mentioned in the beginning that we're probably hearing from other towns and other places, and the answer to that is yes, we are. And they start the conversation by asking for a partnership, but by the end they realize that they're just asking for us to give them stuff. So I point out to them, no, that's not a partnership. So we go through that conversation. But I also just want to personally say congratulations to the team. And I know we still have the high school information to go through, but certainly the great work that's been going on. And when people do call me, I explain to them that there's not one thing. It's not something you can just start today and change everything. This is the results of a lot of hard work over time. And we'll see variability. You always do in these things, and we never emphasize a test score result. But it certainly is an indication of the great work that's going on across our district. And we have everybody sitting in the room here, plus all of the teachers and everyone involved, to thank for their hard work every day on behalf of our kids. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I will go through our data. Also, we're very proud of it, but I also point out the Yankees are on tonight. So for those of you Yankee fans, remember to keep your questions to a minimum. So we're going to go through our assessment review here at the high school. But before we do, I just wanted to touch briefly on what we value as our vision here at the high school. You know, we want a school where parents want to send their children to school, that kids love coming to school and participating in all aspects of the school, and that employees feel valued and respected, and always do what's in the best interest of students. We feel like we do that and trying to honor our mission. And while I won't go through the whole mission, we did partner with our athletics department this year for adopting some core values of being responsible, that students would act responsibly, accountable, that they'd own their actions, that they're motivated, that they seek excellence and not perfection. I think that's a big distinction for us. And that they're strong, they have a strength of character. And with that, I'll start with our data. I'll first start with our ACT scores. Our ACT scores continue to climb. We do very well on our ACTs. You know, I expected last year when we changed the SAT to see a significant rise in the ACT, the number of students taking the ACT. We didn't see that till this year, and that in part I think was because last year they could report out on the old SAT scores and the new SAT scores. So this year it was just the new SAT, and that's why we saw the jump. I guess it would be last year, not this year. So that's why we saw the jump of about 80 students. But yet our scores continue to climb. We had a slight dip in math, but everything else was the same or greater, and our composite score is up. Now, before, I know Penny was talking a little bit about how do you compare nationwide. First of all, statewide, we do better than the state average on the ACTs. Nationwide, we're significantly higher. The composite score is about 21. We were at 27.3. So we do significantly higher than the nationwide average, but also better than the state as well. You know, one thing we added this year was college statistics. You can take a brief snapshot here and take a look at the amount of transcripts that come out of the high school. 2,600 transcripts were sent to 354 colleges. That's 303 students. I think that's about 8-point-something transcripts a student, which actually in some ways surprised me. I thought it would be even higher in some ways, so that was interesting. 93% of our students attend four-year colleges. 82% of them, rated by Barron's, are competitive. 21% are very competitive. 32 are highly competitive, and 29% are most competitive. So that's a very strong population of students that we're setting on beyond New Canaan High School. 2 students are attending international schools. 5 students attended a 2-year college, and just about 100% of our students have a plan following graduation. I think that's something really to be proud of as a school community. Taking a look at our college level offerings. This number has grown in each of the last 2 years. 82% of our grade 12 students have taken at least one college level class. That includes Project Lead the Way, UConn, NCC, and AP designated courses. How we get there, these are our other college options that are up there. Notice of note here, there's a significant number of courses. We added 2 last year. Statistics is an ECE, that's a UConn course, and so is Latin 5. They're UConn courses. They get credit through UConn. So that's 43 additional students we added to our college offerings. Switching gears to advanced placement courses at the high school. We have 26 advanced placement courses that we offer at the high school. You know, again, if something pops up that is suitable for us, we'll take a look at it. We're analyzing some advanced placement courses, as well as I know there's an AP capstone where we take a look at it as well. But when new courses come online that are suitable for us, we'll look at that. That, by the way, is up from 18 about 5 years ago. So we can significantly raise the number of offerings for our students, and that directly impacted the number of tests that are being offered. Again, taking a look at AP and honors participation, this number has also grown. Last year, I think it was about 68%. But this year's seniors, 74.4% of them have taken one or more AP courses. Another 7.8% have taken honors level courses. Again, a total of 82%. This is a different number, but 82% have taken AP or honors courses out of a total class of 308 students. Again, we want to offer our students to be able to take the most advanced courses they could possibly take, but make them be interest-bearing as well. So anytime we can find courses that are college worthy, we want to be able to offer that for them as well. Our scores. This is some pretty interesting data here. AP Scholars, and how you become an AP Scholar is you get a 3 or higher on 3 or more exams. We have 67 students who were able to do that, and we had an average of 3.49. AP Scholars with Honor, there were 33 additional students. To become an AP Scholar with Honor, you need a minimum of 3.25 average on all exams, 3 or higher on 4 or more exams. An AP Scholar with Distinction, you need a 3.5 average on all exams, a 3 or higher on 5 or more exams. We have 83 students that are taking 5 or more AP courses. And then there's the National AP Scholar, a 4 average on all exams, 4 or more on 8 or more exams. A total of 200 students are AP Scholars here at the high school. You'll see how that number has grown over the years. And while we're really proud of our students taking these high-level courses, we also want to watch out for them. That's a lot. You know, students taking that many courses, we want to make sure that they're taken care of in every way possible because, you know, again, we want the best for all of our students. Here's the growth over time. You can see the year before, we had 180 total AP Scholars. And if you go all the way back to 2012, there were only 104. So that number has grown over the years. While our average has dipped slightly, we are getting more and more students challenging themselves to be take the most rigorous courses they could take here at the high school. And we continue to do well by standards of getting a 3 or better. We have over 92% of our students do that. We break down the individual courses here at the high school. Again, our students continue to do very well. We look for some dips or variations where possible. You know, we added about 14 or 15 more kids, so we have a slight dip in that Physics 1 course. We want to take a look at that as we move forward. If you look at the next page, something we're proud of, we sent a teacher for training, and we're constantly sending our teachers to training, trying to make sure that they are prepared, train and retrain them, to be quite honest. Our comparative government and politics course, that teacher went for training last year, increased the number of students in the class and the percentage of students getting a 3 or better, which is what AP considers to be a college passing score of a C, or it's a 75, a 3 or better. We had 75% of those students in that class. It's a significant improvement over what that was in previous years. You'll take a look. You might notice a slight dip in the U.S. government politics. We had a teacher leave and go to a different school. We had 2 new teachers come in, and certainly they're trying to align what they're doing and also gotten some training. So we saw a slight dip there last year, but we expect that to rise. You'll notice some other areas in foreign languages, Latin. We're sending our teachers for training. But one thing I want to point out, in the DERG, basically Darien, Wilton, Greenwich, and Ridgefield do not offer AP Latin. Westport does. They had 2 students take the test, and they also did not get a 3 or better on that test. Weston did have 5 students take it, and their average was a little bit higher, but it's not something that in the DERG students are so outperforming us. But however, we have a very rich Latin program in the district, to be quite honest, and we want to make sure that carries all the way through. So we did add our ECE course this year, and we want to make sure that we get our teachers trained to make sure that we can do the best we possibly can in that moving forward. The total number of tests, again, are interesting. If you take a look over time, from 2013, there were 613 tests in the building. AP tests, last year there was 1,070 tests in the building. You know, that's a pretty short period of time, 5 years and over 400 tests. You know, so our students are trying to be the best they possibly can be, and we're still having a very high pass rate, I guess. It's a 3 or better. We have 92% of our students who are getting a 3 or better on our AP tests. Again, you can take a look, the change over time. From 2011, there were only 18 AP courses offered here at the high school. Now there are 26. Dr. Lutzy may say that part of that was when he was the principal here, he brought some AP courses on. I'm not sure. At least he'd tell me that privately, probably. But we have continued to offer courses where possible. And you can look at the enrollment. You know, from 2011, there was 591 students in, where this year there was 1,147 students taking AP classes. And while that's not the end-all, be-all, one thing I think that is interesting is the percentage of students in grades 10 through 12 who take AP tests. You know, back in 2011, there was only 27.9, and while again, you'd see some variation over this over time, we are trending in the right way, where last year, 47.7% of our students in grades 10 through 12 took an AP test. So that's pretty impressive, and they continue to do well. The more kids that we get in there, they still do very, very well. Again, you'll hear sometimes the term AP equity and excellence. That's a number a lot of the national journal publications will use as a piece of how schools are rated. That number continues to rise. I was joking with Paul Gallo, who helps me put together some things today, that I circled that box on purpose in blue. I really didn't. I just kind of left the cursor over it. But that was our low point of 43.9, and we continue to improve almost every year. We had a dip here or there, and you will see some occasional fluctuations, but we're continuing to improve. We're 57.2% of the senior class enrolled in an AP class get a 3 or better. Now, if we switch gears from AP to SAT, you talked a little bit about the SAT. I kind of tried to get a little crazy here. I can't see it on my screen anymore, but one's gray and one's white. The new SAT is in white, and the gray SAT is the old one. Writing is no longer in existence. It's a part of the English and Language Arts scores. And we continue to have solid growth, from 2016 to 2017 in math, and in language arts, we did better, going from a 605 in English language arts to 612 this year, and from 607 to 619. Now, here's a slight variation. Penny was talking a little bit about the male versus female scores, and again, the challenge at one point was to get the males to do better in English language arts. Here, they're doing better. We have 619 for our English language arts average for our males and 606 for our females. However, you heard Dr. Carenti talk earlier about our CAP scores. The females outperform the males there. So interesting, it's certainly interesting data to look at. And you did see our females had the highest growth in the math of any of the growth that we had there, the 15-point swing. Our subject tests, I was talking to Cindy, less than 15 schools nationally use this now. So we're getting less and less students taking these tests, but I think it's down to 13, Cindy? Is that what you thought? That require the subject test. Comparative data is a little hard to find, but we do well. So here are our scores, but I'm not going to spend that much time on the subject test. And our mean averages. Now, these are the averages of the SAT scores from the 2017 results for Durgay. We do well. We're in the mix with other schools there. We had a 615 average for language arts. Certainly, we want to be at the top of the DERG, but we seem to be in the middle for our mean. That's our average. And for math, we were third at 612. Again, this is the second year of the test. We grew, but so do some other schools in our DERG. What the state counts as benchmark data, getting a level 3 or 4, where we fit in there, we were third for language arts, right behind Darien, which is probably one student when you're going from 94.8% to 94.4%. It's probably one student difference between us and Darien there. And likewise, third in math, and probably, again, one student difference between Weston and us as well. We, again, continue to be at the upper end of the DERG and the top of the state. These schools are the best schools in the state. There's no other schools that do as well as us. Where we want to continue to go. We want to continue to research and design and plan for next generation science standards. We want to take a look at our benchmark assessments internally and take a look at how we do on the SAT. We want to look for ways to bolster and integrate reading instruction across disciplines. We want to make sure we improve and expand our differentiation in our building. We want to make sure instruction across all grade levels is appropriate. We want to train and retrain our staff of the AP assessments. We want to continue to have our students work to seek excellence, but not perfection. And our mathematics department will continue to monitor and refine our math centers and new integrated geometry course to meet the needs of our students. And in conclusion, we're going to continue to partner with our families to make the decisions for and with our students. I did have an article in here, and you guys have access to this. There was a New York Times article that recently talked about a high-performing school district just like this, with a student loaded in AP tests and kind of where that student went with their mental health. Again, I thought that was just important to share that. There was a similar district. We wanted to, again, look for ways we're working on our whole child, encourage conversations about passions, priorities, and balance, and help our students develop resiliency as they mature and achieve meaningful success. We're really proud of the work we do here at the high school and the district. We think we come with great students come to us, and we're blessed to have great families that work with us. So we're proud of how we do, and we'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'll open it up to everyone. Any questions? Brendan.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what you're trying to do to address the health of the whole child? And obviously, a lot of these kids have packed calendars.
Sure.
Looking at the number of tests they're taking.
Cindy, you want to speak a little bit to that?
I think we're working both with the individual child and with groups of students. We have a whole school climate initiative that we're working with at the district level all the way down, working with these kids to assure that. We're talking with faculty. We've done a school climate survey, which someone can speak to better than I can about that. But in terms of addressing how kids perceive attachment to adults in the building and how teachers perceive that, there was a little bit of a gap in that. And so we're working through our Connections curriculum, which is an advisory kind of group that kids meet once a cycle with students. So I think it's something
We offer
all
programming
can.
with parents. We work with our kids. So we're really trying to address the whole child, not just the kids per se, but also families as well.
Okay, thanks.
Chair? I don't know if I should answer, sorry.
I mean, I just want to expand upon that because I, both as a board member and a parent, I am concerned about the health and well-being and the stress levels in this very high-achieving community. And I can't speak to everything, and I'm so positive on everything the school is doing around the school climate and the social emotional intelligence initiatives. And with Cynthia's team and the counseling center, I think they do an excellent job in each and every parent session and really trying to bring a more reasonable pace to the, to advising the parents to bring a more reasonable pace to the student's life. But the fact is that, there are very high stress levels here in this building. And one specific concern I have is around the test prep culture. I mean, students start at a very early age, as young as 7th and 8th grade, where they seek professional test prep. And this is not just a New Canaan, this is a national issue, but, and again, I do actually think the school and Cynthia's team and Sue Carroll, like with all the resources they provide, and even on Facebook, they're always posting articles on mental health and, tests, how to really calm test stress and all that. But the fact of the matter is, though it does exist. So I think we just need to continue this dialogue, and I think we need to continue this dialogue as a community in terms of really looking out for these students' well-being.
Well, it's a balance, right? I mean, we certainly want to do the best we possibly can at all times. I mean, if you ask me, I want to be number one in everything we do here, but realistically, you want to take care of the student's health. And you want to work with the parents to make sure that they also have an appropriate balance and everyone's prioritizing. But we also want to let parents be parents. So I do think there's a balance.
Jen?
I would love just to add to that, because I've got quite a few kids in high school right now, and the stress level.
Yes, you do.
The stress level is very high right now in our house, especially with our senior. But I was so impressed at the open houses for both my junior and senior. The teachers, again, we're talking about this trickle down, that we're working on with really supporting the whole child and promoting the happy, I guess, is what we're saying. But no, really, I had at least 3 teachers that night say, we understand the pressure that your kids are under. My boys are in some AP classes, and it's stressful, right? And they were like, if something has happened, if something comes up, like, please have them reach out to me. And there's been a couple times already this semester where, you know, one of my boys has been stressed. I'm like, go to them. Like, they said you could go to them, and they send out an email, and they are gotten right back to you. And, you know, I've got, you know, they have multiple tests, and they're able to get an extension or this or that. So they are understanding. I mean, that made me feel so much better.
And we were having
Just
constant
that.
dialogue as well as a faculty, just talking about workload, when work is given. There's a couple things we tried to do with homework-free weekends and different things like that as well. But we also want to keep in mind, you know, how we're impacting the kids, because it's not just your individual class, it's the entire workload that a kid
Right.
has.
Maria?
I had two questions, of course. One was on the AP. I think one of the biggest things I saw with my own children is the accelerated pace, because they have to finish like 4 weeks early or 3 weeks early to be ready for the test. Are those test dates ever flexible? I
No,
mean,
they're set ahead of time,
yeah,
not by
that's
us.
it. I mean, because that's really, that put on so much extra pressure just trying to get through the content.
It does, and we don't set those.
So that kind of leads into the next thing, like with the Latin, my kids do take the Latin, and I'm happy to see that we're having the early college credit for Latin, you know, and I'd like to go in that direction. Is there a way to look at even more classes that can have that option and/or NCC type thing?
Yes.
How does that happen?
We work with our department chairs. We have conversations every year about possible offerings through ECE or AP. You know, and last year we added 2 ECE courses. We tried adding a third, but UConn actually wouldn't allow it. They wanted to do it over a semester, and we really wanted to spread the pace out for the year, so we dropped an additional course that we were going to look into. So really, our department chairs are working all the time to see what fits in, and then we have to get UConn to accept our teachers as certified adjunct professors, and then obviously they've got to adopt their curriculum, and we take their tests.
And what about NCC? I saw there were
Similar
same
similar
thing.
setup, yeah. And the neat thing about, I'll speak to UConn. UConn has like an 87% transferable rate, so those UConn courses are transferable throughout the country. Sure.
Sherry.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I gotta stop doing that, Deanna, I'm sorry.
I just had a question.
It's not my show.
I just had a question about the ACT versus the SAT, and can you just talk to, I mean, so there was a significant increase in the number of students choosing to take the ACT this past year, and are they now prepping for both tests, both the ACT and the SAT, or are they opting to really focus more on the ACT, and if so, why? I'm just curious about that trend of, I mean, that was a significant jump from 133
Well, certainly the
to
SAT is our
216.
statewide test, so they have to do that.
Right, so I know they have to take the SAT, but are they prepping to take the SAT as well as the ACT? Like, what's behind that trend?
We always do advise the kids to take a practice test in each and choose one
Right.
to prepare for. We believe the SAT, the state test, they're being well prepared in their classrooms, and sometimes once the kids have taken it, they decide just to stay with that. So we leave it up to them, because every college in the country will take either one at this point. It's no longer a regional test. So it's really up to the student and their own comfort level with each test. So we fully leave it up to them, and some just feel more comfortable with the ACT. It's more of a speed test, but the questions tend to be more surface level. So you know it or you don't, you move through it more quickly. So some kids feel that that's more comfortable. The SAT tends to be more of a deep reading test, so kids who are good, solid readers have more time on each question, they feel more comfortable with that one. So that's a really quick, in a nutshell, difference between.
But I'm just curious more about the trend, because there was a pretty steady participation of the ACT, and then this past year, it jumped from 133 test takers to 216.
I think that was with the new test. You know, honestly, the year before was the first year of the new test,
Yeah.
but there was also the old test was offered that same year.
Got it.
So this year being the first year that only the new test is offered, that's where you saw the jump.
And I also think just the culture, that it's much more, it was something that slowly has gained popularity, but it was always never considered a viable option. Most kids still really went for that SAT. And now I don't think that's true at all. Kids really choose one or the other.
Great, thank you.
Maria?
For the school day SAT, does it still not include that writing?
Yeah,
So
it's not.
students would still have to take it?
Correct.
Again, yeah.
Other questions? I have a question about the alignment. So, I've heard, that the new SAT is aligned to the standards with the Connecticut core. The ACT is not, or are they both aligned? I just,
So, Anthony, do you want to talk about the SAT? Here, I have them here.
yeah, no.
Yeah, might as well use us, right? The SAT exam is now modeled after the Common Core exam. So there are 4 main strands, Hearts of Algebra. It's geared towards the change to the Common Core.
So I guess the question I'm thinking with the ACT, so we saw a jump, and I agree. I think that jump is related to lack of data, lack of test prep companies being prepared to deal with a new test, and I think there's a lot of variables that will probably flush out after a couple more years of this new test. I guess my interest is more that I look at where we stood on the SAT, the school-administered SAT, which is theoretically aligned to the standards, versus sort of how we did on our, ELA and math scores in the district. And so obviously it's a snapshot in time. It's hard to compare, but they're all snapshots in time. So, do you have any commentary on, sort of the difference on how we performed?
I think what's most interesting with the SAT that we need to keep remembering is that the students do have the option of not having the score reported. So it will go to the state of Connecticut. So when you're looking at those scores, you don't know, all of those scores that may not be reported. Nor do you know in Darien or Wilton, you don't have all of that information because it is a child's preference, and they don't have to let us know that they're not having their score report to the College Board. So it goes into the state of Connecticut as participation. They completed the assessment, but we don't get those results back. That is part of the agreement that the College Board has made with the state of Connecticut, so it counts towards your participation, but it will not sit in College Board. So after the student takes the SAT, they do have the option of going online and having the score not reported. So it's hard sometimes when you're looking at all those numbers to tease all of that out as well.
Right, and that's a wonderful thing that the state has agreed to with the so that answers the question. So thank you. Do you think you'll see a shift back to more SAT takers over time because it is more aligned with the
They're taking
standards?
it anyway. It's so hard to say because they're all taking the SAT. It's really just that shift of the number of kids in the ACT. Will some of them drop off? Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm really asking.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing from other school districts, other superintendents, other guidance departments, is that they're encouraging students to take both, to sit for the SAT, to sit for the ACT, and see which one they prefer as a test taker, and then to work on that in the future. So I think you'll see high numbers in both areas for the foreseeable future, as long as that advice is being shared with kids and families.
Maria?
I just want to say, I do think we have to really think about the stress levels, because I'm just counting all the tests that are hitting, the PSAT, SAT in school, SAT Saturday, ACT, and now the science. That's a lot of high-stakes tests in a short amount of time.
And the students are also taking, the junior year, they're taking their first AP tests.
Right,
often,
right.
Visiting colleges and getting
making
ready for that
tests,
experience as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think that certainly is something we always have to keep in mind. We have to support our kids as they're doing this and let them know that, this is, no one test makes or breaks anything, right? It's all part of a picture that they put together and, who they are as students or what have you. But we don't want so much stress put on any one assessment that students take that can be paralyzing for them. So I think that's part of our work as educators, as teachers, and work with them to help them to have some perspective in what they're doing.
Well, it's just amazing to me that we have 83 kids, taking 5 or more exams in the building. It's a lot.
And would feedback from the colleges help bring it down a little? I mean, are colleges looking for that many AP tests when students are?
Kids want to take the most rigorous program they could possibly take, so that's going to include these tests,
Can you come up?
Yeah.
Can you come up?
Okay. I think there is a bit of a myth that there is this talk in town that you have to take that many APs. And every individual parent will say, well, we don't want to let anything go when they're talking with their kids about it. And they see their kids being stressed, but they don't want anything to drop back because each one of them is very competitive with their neighbors. And so it's a real conversation to keep having because it's not the colleges saying it for the most part. They would be perfectly happy with those kids taking 3 APs or 4 APs over the course of their life in a high school and seeing excellence. And good standardized testing scores, that's for sure. But I think we overdo it with one-upping each other all the time. And everyone has to take note of that.
Other questions? Penny?
I know we bring the students back to talk to graduates, recent graduates, to talk to the current students. And one of the things I've been struck by as I've talked to various parents is how many of them say to me, I cannot believe how well my children were prepared by New Canaan High School for college. They really went to college and they had very few bumps. And honestly, I remember having the same feeling when my kids went off. So do we ever bring back parents who have kids who've graduated in the recent years to talk to the current parents as a way to try and, it's just an idea to throw out there.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
To throw out there to try and bring down the parent stress level, which might bring down the overall stress
It's a good idea, bringing alumni parents back. I like it.
Well, I would just say, as an alumni parent with a freshman in college, we have another board member. I just had her home for the weekend, and I applaud all of you because she said it is, I wouldn't use the word cakewalk, but it is significantly easier than her experience at New Canaan High School. So that was out of her mouth. So I
hope that's a good thing, that she's prepared.
She's prepared. Hey, as a parent, I would say that, my child is home with me and I was able to manage stress in our home. And, I would prefer her to be less stressed when isn't in my home where I'm there able to manage that. She's off experiencing a whole lot of different things all at once, and academic rigor on top of that would be a lot to handle. So, I don't know, Tom, you have 2.
Exactly, but no, same goes for my kids. They remark to me all the time how well prepared they were going into college, coming out of New Canaan High School. And again, I wouldn't use cakewalk. They go to very difficult schools, but they found it quite manageable.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, and Maria, you're there too.
They're very, we're getting good reports, so it's great. I think they've been very well prepared. And, I don't think, kids are all different. Some kids, 3 AP courses, it's not even on their radar.
Yeah.
I have one of those. So,
But you're
I just
right,
think,
though.
how do we collectively decrease the stress, and try to make them feel that you don't have to do 5 AP and everything that, it's
I
kind of
think you
hard.
hit the nail on the head. It's a collective effort, right?
Right,
And,
yeah.
whether it's through a program that we do with parents, whether it's through our work with the kids, it's how we communicate with the kids, our expectations we set out for the kids. I think it has to be a collective effort.
I like the alumni parent idea because
I do
it's
too.
true.
Yeah.
You look down, things are different today. They are escalating. And those of us that have older kids, we can say, it's not really that important. It's okay. So it's a good idea.
That is good.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. It's just a really impressive presentation and impressive work that you are all doing for our kids, so thank you.
Go Yankees.
Oh, I know.
That's so unusual. Good.
All right. So moving on to the statement of accounts, Dr. Lutzy.
Yes, now I know how Dr. Keating feels each month when she does the statement of accounts and everyone leaves. She unfortunately isn't feeling well tonight, so she wasn't able to make it to join us. But just very quickly to run through, this is the statement of accounts for the end of the month, September 30th of this year. Obviously, we're very early in the year. And what we've begun to do is to encumber things that are known costs in the system so that we then can have a handle on what available funding there still is. So we haven't finished doing that yet, but primarily it's the salary encumbrances that we're doing, given our position control that we put in place 2 years ago. So when we get the October 30th, we'll have that completed. There are no transfers here. Again, we're new in the year as we're going through, so there's nothing to approve. But I just thought that to share with you briefly, and it was reviewed with our Resources Committee, the initial sort of run-through on the encumbrances. And again, you'll see that the majority of that is salaries. As you know, 82% of our budget is salaries and benefits. And then we have some other items here. On page 2, you'll see written in, it was classroom tutors, and we are going to rename that into instructional support. Because given the last year's budget process, there was some confusion around the term tutors with the town boards. And that instructional support is work we do with our EL program, in some other spots. So we just thought that would clarify, so there was, again, some confusion with that. But beyond that, you're welcome to take a look, and we're just beginning to sort of encumber and balance things out as we implement the FY18 budget.
Okay.
There you have it.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. You got an easy one. It's early in the year.
It is.
Okay, and moving on to comments from the public. Anyone? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements and future business. Dr. Lutzy.
Sure. Our next meeting is November 6th, and at that meeting, we will have our enrollment and staffing update. Gary will be here to share with us our enrollment. We'll have a report back from NASDAQ on our enrollment projections. As you know, we use October 1st as the date we capture the enrollment, and then they work through the analysis of that. So we'll be getting that back and presenting that to the board, and then also our staffing utilization documents will come. Both are certified and non-certified. So Gary will be sharing that with us, and we also anticipate between now and then that the 2 non-certified groups will have an opportunity to meet, and pending ratification of the contracts we've been negotiating with them, we would have those for the board's approval as well. And there we have it. And should I announce that the soccer team just won? Or
Yes, you can do that.
And I'm glad to announce that the soccer team just won tonight. Yay. All right.
That was boys varsity soccer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should be specific. Boys varsity.
Okay, so moving on to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? Hazel, second. Brendan, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.